Welcome to The Founder Factor, where we interview some of South Carolina's most impactful entrepreneurs. Today on the show, we are joined by Marty Osborn, who is the managing director at Accenture. Thanks so much for joining us today. Great to have you.
Well, it's good to be back. Or I guess not back. Like, I think when we talked last time, it was in an interview, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I looked, the date of that was, I think, like March 2020 or April. So yeah, definitely times are looking a little bit different than they were then.
They are in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should start off by tell us a bit about your role at Accenture, like the story of, how Advoco came to be. Just give us the high level bird's eye view of all of that.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of goes back a little bit. It's funny because I think you've interviewed a lot of data stream people, like being in Greenville, and I always laugh because I was part of the data stream mafia. Mm-hmm. In the early days, worked for data stream. Prior to that, I, right out of college, started a software company working in the garment industry, apparel industry. And so always kind of had this entrepreneurial heart. And through that, done some corporate work for Fleur Daniel, running their software group. Went to data stream. They got acquired, and finally I really kind of wanted to create a business I wanted to work for. So I started a company called Advoco with another partner, Steve Brindle. And then from there, we grew the company and got acquired in 2001 by Accenture. So now I'm here with the part of the Accenture team now is carrying on the Advoco legacy.
Oh, so exciting. Yeah. Well, so tell me about, obviously, I know from when we've chatted, but I know that Advoco, the work that you guys did and are continuing to do through Accenture is a pretty specialized niche. So can you explain a bit about what that niche is?
So, data stream at the time and the product was really software for maintenance, maintaining buildings, plants. I will say if you look at a Frito-Lay truck or a Pepsi truck, there's a little number on the back and it tracks all the maintenance history. What we do is we help companies like that implement the software. So we became really specialized and really good at helping companies implement software to get it up and running, get it adopted, and hopefully reach, their goals of saving money.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go way back when to the start of Advoco. What were you like as an individual then? Like, what was the kind of the spark that started Advoco? What was that like getting it off the ground?
I kind of have this saying through the years. I've worked for a lot of assholes. And, I think sometimes leadership styles become very authoritative, sometimes yellers, screamers. And it just, to me, that wasn't the way I believed you should do business or how you should treat people. And so I always had this belief in, I want to build a company I want to work for, right? A company that's a little bit different. And, if anybody's seen the movie Jerry Maguire, right? When he writes his manifesto and we're going to love our employees and love our customers, I said, that was me. And literally, one day I just said, I can't take sort of this corporate world anymore. I want to do something different. And kind of, I always said I didn't have a plan, but I wrote a manifesto, walked out the door, and helped start Advoco.
So what did your manifesto say?
Well, it's funny, is it
Give us all the secrets.
Yeah, well, the easiest secret is I always said it's all about love. Like, it's weird to say love in a business, but you really have to love your employees, love your customers, and also love the problem. To me, one of the successes is that when you believe so much or passion for the problem you're trying to solve, then it's easy. I think sometimes people get hung up on the solution as opposed to, if you don't really love the problem, then you're chasing solutions and they don't seem to match up. And so I always thought the problem was, how do we, so many projects fail, so many implementations fail. There's statistics, 50% of all projects end in failure, and it shouldn't be that way. And so to me, we wanted to solve that problem. And the real way you do it is through great people. And so we really set out to build, a world-class team that was all driven by that common vision, that common passion. And so just wanted to do it differently.
Sure. Makes sense. And how do you actually do that in practice? It's one thing to have, a lot of companies will have their founding mission or their ethos, plastered up on the wall. But how do you, what practices did you implement to accomplish those goals?
Yeah. And it's a great question because, I saw this one guy speak and he said, everybody stand up if they have the mission statement and vision, right? And everybody stands up.
Right.
And then he says, how many of you can repeat it right now? Right. And everybody sits down because we write these things. I think the problem, and especially for entrepreneurs, is we write this stuff, but is it what we believe? And so to me, one of the things that stuck out to me is Jeff Bezos had said brand is what people say about your product when you leave the room. And to me, one of the key things is around leadership is your leadership brand is what do people say about you when you leave the room?
Sure.
And if you look at a lot of times, I did a survey and I said, how many people work for a really bad boss, right? 85, 90% of the people have. And you'd say, what are the words that describe that person? You know, and you think about the words, it just comes to your mind. You could write them down and then said, have you ever really worked for a great leader, a great boss? What were those words? And when you sit down, you think about it, those are the words you want to be spoken. And so to me, when we built Advoco, we thought and we were intentional in our leadership brand and the words. And it wasn't just that the company had it, but me and my other partners believed it each and every day. And I think that sometimes is the disconnect, is you can't put these great words on the wall, yet as a leader, you're getting mad, you're dismissive, it's all about me, not we, and those kind of things. So I think that was one of the keys to the business, was intentionally saying, this is who we want to be, but it's also as leaders, as individuals, who we wanted to be.
That's a great. That's a great way of looking at it, and I think definitely it's different than how people typically approach it. It's like it starts at the person level, and that's what creates the overall company brand. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to keep that in mind for my own business.
Well, we challenge it each and every day when we look at mission statements and we look at what people say. You really go back to the leader, and one of the questions of employees is, does that leader truly embrace it and live it? And a lot of times you get that mismatch, right? And so I also talk a little bit about sometimes if you think about, you can say who your brand as a leader is, right? But sometimes our organizations want different things. Our teams may want different things. Our families want different things. And so if those aren't also in balance, then you also have a problem. And so I think sometimes you have to look at these things and then really just what you say you're going to do, you have to live them.
Exactly. And then from a hiring perspective, how do you vet out those behavioral qualities?
Well, it was actually funny because I'll have to tell a story is in the early days, again, I'll say one thing about entrepreneurs, we hire too fast and we fire too slow. Now, and I'll say fire because I don't think it's a bad thing. I think sometimes there's just not cultural fits. And if you do it in the right way, we have people thank us when we separate because we'll talk through why and whether it's the right place or not. But hiring really boils down to, knowing these things. And so one time we had a senior leader that just did not embrace the Advoco culture, whatever. And when we parted ways, somebody said, well, what happened? Why did you part ways? We said he wasn't Advoco. And they said, well, what is that? And we're like, and we didn't have our mission vision for the company. And so I think there was an inflection point where we really had to make sure not only we knew it in our heart, but we stated it. And so then every hiring decision sort of ran through those pieces. Okay.
I feel like sometimes it does take one or two or however many people not matching the correct personality or qualities for you to really be able to actually define what are the qualities you're looking for.
Yeah. So I'll say this, one of the things that's interesting is culture isn't something you can just say you want, put it on a mission statement, right? You have to live it every day and people have to feel it. And when you finally get that right culture and you get the right people, they end up defending it more than we as leaders do. And so to me, one of the big things in hiring people is, and I made the comment, people hire too fast. One of the things we learned was we were hired way too fast, which was causing really, I think, lack of cultural fit. Now to get hired at Advoco, it was 15 interviews. 15? Right. And it kind of scares you, but part of it is in the early days, people know how to answer the first 2 and 3. But when you're trying to find cultural fit, you really want them to meet a lot of people, right? And the team then says, yes, this person's a good fit or not. And it's not just your expertise, because we can always train expertise, but we want to know culturally, are you the right person, the right fit, and that kind of stuff. And when we slowed down, that's when we started to get better.
Okay. Yeah, 15 interviews. Oh my gosh. I mean, it does make sense though. You want the interviewee to be able to meet people on your team, really get a sense of if they feel like the right match. And that's not just for one person, that's like culture is a company-wide endeavor. So it does make sense. It's a lot of interviews, but it makes sense.
It's a lot of interviews. And the funny thing is our last interview is a lot of fun because we have a 30-minute where you have to give a presentation in front of like 6 to 8 people.
Oh, wow.
And you can do whatever you want, talk about whatever you want. We just want to know, can you articulate? Do you know how to be on point? That kind of stuff, right? Just to see it. And it's, again, it's just a small test to see how they're going to react under pressure.
Right.
And again, we deal a lot with being with clients, being out there. And so that's always been interesting to see that make or break. And we've seen some kind of doozy
I believe it. That is a whole different skill set. That does feel like the culmination of all of the interview efforts.
It does.
The final test.
So that was big. The other thing that we are big on is testing. And it's interesting because there's a million tests out there. Our favorite is called the DISC profile. And I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's I
think I did this several years ago after we talked.
Yeah, you're like,
I have no idea. I do not remember my results, but I do remember doing it.
So the big one is it's the DISC profile. And one of the keys is there's 4 elements to it. And one of the things I'm a big believer in is if you can't explain on the back of a napkin, like, the Enneagram, there's Strength Finders, there's all of these that are really good tests. But you can't explain on the back of a napkin. I'm going to explain DISC profile. It's simply 4 elements. D is for decision making, right? So a high D is somebody who makes a quick decision very fast. A lower D wants more information and slows down. So an example is if you send me a 2-page email, I've already made my decision. I'm like a 99 out of scale of 100 D.
I think I'd be a 10.
Yeah. Like I'm answering people's emails and people are like, didn't you read the email? Like I answered it in the first sentence.
Yeah.
And so D is how quickly you make decisions. I is interactive, right? So a 100 I is a social person, a lower I. And funny story is I'm a 99I, so I'm always the last one to leave a party. Always. Doesn't matter what the event is. My wife is a low I. And every time we get to go out, she goes, no, you're just going to stay all night and talk.
That's so funny.
And I'm like, no, Lisa, we're not. One drink and we're gone.
Right.
And we get there.
Famous last words.
Famous last. I'm the last one. And so typically I's are more interactive, social. Lower tend not to be like, they'll go in, go out. C or S is for stabilizing, which is more social, which high S is like teamwork, like they want to be more part of a team. Lower S tends to be more, I think, individual.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if you have a really high S person, and then C is caution, but it's really detail oriented. So high C's like a lot of detail. They want the 10-page email. Yes. Give me the bullets. Give it to me in details, where a low C, again, is just go quick. And why it's important is what we did is we would take the DISC profile, print it out, put it on everybody's desk, because not only is it how I want to consume information, but I get to understand how you want to consume information. And so we used to have emails and we'd say for the high Ds, for the high Cs, we'd have these lengthy emails. But it just, again, it's not right or wrong. It's how people act. And so my last story on this one is my business partner is exact opposite to me. High C, lower D. And so with Steve, every time I'd be writing a proposal, and again, it's killing me, right? No C, want to get this done. I am like in my working frustration. And I'll go, Steve, can you just take a look at this? No, Marty, I know you're going to want me to do all the work. Steve, no, I don't. I'm worried about grammar. Can you just take a look at it? All right, I'll look at it, and he'll rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a 10-hour. You just signed him up for a 10-hour
Oh,
gig.
yeah, and he knows it, but he can't let it go.
Yep.
And so, but it's how we worked. And so one of the things that I would say if I looked at the success of Advoco is if you looked at the partners, we had different disc profiles that complemented each other. Because if both of us were high Ds, we just, it's like two beta fish.
Exactly.
It doesn't work. Like we have great ideas, but nobody's getting it done. If you're all Cs, everybody wants detail and there's no ideas.
Right.
So that one I think was really big early is we wanted to just understand how the team starts to fit. The second time I said two of them, and the other one is something relatively new, but it's called Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Maybe this is the one I took. These words are all sounding familiar. I don't remember which one.
He's an organizational guy. He's wrote like the 5 dysfunctions of a team and Death by Me. Like he's got some really great books. But Working Genius was the perfect complement. And what it does is you take this test and it says all of us have 2 working geniuses and 2 working frustrations. And the acronym, it's widget. So W is wonderment, right? So certain people just kind of dream. They're always thinking about what's out there. I is for invention. They love to create, always creating, always doing something. The D is discernment. So typically a discerner is somebody who connects dots, takes 2 ideas, puts them together. G is galvanizing, which is like, let's go.
This is the one I took.
This is the one you took, and I'm going to ask you. So E is enablement, right? And that's more like the nurturing person, and T is tenacity.
Yep.
And tenacity is, I think the best way to describe it's the last 20% of a project.
Oh, okay.
So a working frustration is T, low C. And like I'll do a project at home and I get 80% of the way done and it's not done. My tools are laying and it drives my wife crazy, right? Are you going to finish this project? But it just becomes a friend. Like I love the beginning. I hate the end.
Yep.
Right. And so when you look at a team, you really have to balance that team because you need people to invent and dream. You need somebody to discern good idea, bad idea. You need somebody to rally the troops. You need somebody to enable and T. And so when I looked at our teammates, like Mary, who's my marketing person, high T, right? She is high T, give me a task, let's get it done, which worked perfectly for what we were trying to do every day. And we always laugh because she's like, give me the list, let me knock it out, right? Whereas me, I'm a discerner. So one of my skills is connecting dots, and I'm a galvanizer, rally the troops. Working frustration is enablement. So think about this. Let's go. Okay, I've said 3 times, let's go. Now I'm frustrated.
Oh, I see. Okay. I
right? So there's some people that do it where enablement's like, well, they'll get it. Give them time. No, let's go. So ET is my working frustration. So you start to understand that. And what other just last story is we have a sales guy we found out every time we give him a PowerPoint, he changes it. Right? And so the marketing team creates all these branding standards, gives it to him, and he changes it. And they'll get kind of frustrated, like, why are you changing this?
Yeah, marketing, that's a no-no.
That's a no-no. But I think because he's an inventor, that's just who he is and what he wants to do. And I think once we knew that, we just say, he's just being Jimbo.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? He's just doing it. And we know what he's doing and how it does it. And so I think that those two together, I think helped us build one of the strongest and greatest teams. And I think when you get to know your team like that as an entrepreneur, I think there's no place you can't go.
Yeah, that also sounds a lot more, team oriented than like the Myers-Briggs or any of what's the one that's like 1 Wing 7? I don't know. There's so many, but some of those don't really exactly apply to a teamwork model because they're more about just understanding you as the individual. Whereas what you're talking about, you start to see how all the pieces interact in the machine.
Right. And we have it on our board. Like there's a whole wall of working geniuses and frustrations. And it just really explains. Because, one of the things you think about, sometimes we'll watch team dynamics and we'll watch a battle between 2 people. Like, well, they just don't like each other. I think what happens is you get a high I person who's always inventing and a working genius of T. they get mad at each other because the T is trying to T and the I is trying to create.
Yeah.
But I think once they understand what frustrates them, that I frustrates me or would frustrate a person, then they can say, okay, I understand why I'm mad. It's not really the person.
Right.
It's just they keep inventing. Stop inventing.
This is making me brainstorm a lot in terms of family dynamics as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I pick on my daughter a little bit because she's super great at graphic and design, but she hates to do it.
Yep.
And it frustrates me. Like, why don't you want to do this? And when she did the Working Genius, a working frustration is invention. She doesn't like to invent. And so typically really good graphic and design people, if you looked at them, are really a working genius is an I.
Yeah.
They want to invent. They love creating, designing. And so once I said that, I get it. And I don't pressure, like, I don't get frustrated with her. Why don't you design this?
It's the way she's wired. Yeah.
It's the way she's wired.
Yep.
So.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we're back, I'd love to jump into how you might think that those characteristics have shifted over time for you, how it compares now to how it looked when you were starting off with Advoco.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back. This podcast is brought to you by Designly, South Carolina's top-rated app development company, and Word of Web, your partner in smarter website strategy and design. Welcome back to The Founder Factor. We're here chatting with Marty Osborn, who's the managing director at Accenture. All right, welcome back. Welcome back from the break.
Yeah, we had a good break too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lively discussion. Yeah.
Well, let's jump back in with thinking about, looking back at when you started Advoco. How have you as a leader changed?
It's always a good question. How have I changed? I think sometimes in the early days, and I think one of the best stories is even though we know who we want to be as leaders, sometimes as entrepreneurs in the early days, we think we have to do it all, right? Sometimes we think that we're, I don't want to say the smartest person in the world, but we try to keep doing each and everything and we don't sometimes let our teams do it. And I had a really good lesson, and I give a shout out to Scott Millwood because Scott has always been, we worked together at DataStream as I started Advoco. Scott had started his business and was a few years ahead of me. And so I would always call Scott all the time, ask him questions. I mean, just even how to buy furniture. What do you do on a lease? Where'd you get this? Where'd you get that? And I was really quizzing him about like certain things around how they did consulting and everything. And I'm struggling to grow. And I look at Scott and I said, what do you think? And he looked me in the eye and he said, you know who the problem is? And I said, no. And he pointed to me. He goes, you're the problem. It's not really
direct.
It's not really what I wanted to hear, but he was right because I was trying to micromanage and put my hands in everything. And when you as a leader, as you grow, when you don't step back and let your team grow, the key to really, I think, success is leverage.
Yeah.
And you have to let your team do the work. And just like raising kids, they're going to do great things. They're going to do bad things. You have to let go. And I think that was the number one or a turning point is the more I let go, the better we did. Now, it's a little hard on the ego, right? Because our egos say, if I don't do these tasks, then I won't be needed.
Yeah, good point.
And that's, I think, sometimes as owners, as leaders, we worry about if I don't do this. And I hear people sometimes when I try to say, you need to get rid of that work, pass it on. Well, if I don't do this, then why will I be needed? I'm like, no, I need you to do creative things. I needed to be out there thinking of new ideas. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson was to just stop trying to do it all.
Yeah.
And once I did that, that's really when the company took off.
Right. Yeah. Just relinquishing control a little bit, letting people who know better do their thing.
Yeah.
It is tough on the pride though.
It is hard on the pride. It really is because you're afraid at some point in time. And funny story too is when I really took it to the next level and my team will laugh about it, but sometimes I would go in my office, shut the door and I would sit there and I would I don't know what to do. And I wanted to pick up the phone and I wanted to call a customer and I would just literally sit for an hour, 2 hours sometimes and say, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Right. But it was the right thing to do. And I think once you accept that and you realize the team succeeds, you succeed.
Yeah. Well, this is a different different question, same vein though. You said that just like with raising kids, they're going to make mistakes, or they're going to do great things. You got to let them learn. What was your biggest mistake starting out with your business? We'll limit it to just business mistake.
Oh man, yeah. I always said my favorite song was Molly Hatchet, "Flirting with Disaster." Right? So it's kind of been a theme. I don't, biggest mistake. I don't know if anything. It's weird, kind of maybe jumps out, but I think some of my biggest mistakes may have just been in some early hires. Like I hired for the wrong reason. Like I added people to the team that weren't really part of the bigger vision. Okay. And so the scary part is you spend a lot of time getting them up, training, and then you realize it's a bad fit. And you lose, in your mind, you're like, I just lost a year. Right. Like that's the scary part. What's that called? Like the investment bias? Yeah. There's a word for that I can't remember. Yeah. And there's a whole word on whether you do it or not. And so I just think early on, I didn't have the skills. Like I knew how to be a good person. I knew how to kind of lead, but I didn't have some of the testing things. Like really, again, probably the best thing that ever happened to Advoco is when I stopped hiring people, right? And I stopped interviewing. I might pass a name, but when the team took over, they just said, Marty, stay out. Yeah. Because sometimes owners, we get passionate about things and we forget about the big picture. So I think hiring is probably some of the biggest mistakes. And again, good people just maybe culturally or, weren't the right fit. And now, is there anything you would have told yourself starting off with Advoco? Any advice you would have given your younger self? I know it's a classic question. It's a classic question. I mean, I think early on it would have been to give up things sooner. Yeah. I mean, I think what I just talked about is for years, and again, I mean, one of the things I always laugh about, and we were probably, I'm trying to think, maybe in business for 4 or 5 years, we were doing okay, but not great. And, every day we sort of fought every day, and you can write goals and everything else, but we can't see in the future. And so one of my business partners said, we need to do something different. We need to go to an event, a podcast or something. And I was a big EntreLeadership, like a Dave Ramsey's got a group called EntreLeadership. And he has this 4-day summit. And in that summit, me and my partner Steve went. And it was a 4-day summit. And basically you learn mission, vision, values, hire, fire, legal, all the stuff that runs a business, like the key elements. I tell you what, I got so fired up. I always said I became a born-again businessman because I went from not knowing what to do, it just was clear. And so I came back and everybody laughs. I remember to tell a story is literally I got the company together and said, we're going to double the company in the next 3 years. And I would have never said that before. I would never laid that goal out because I couldn't see it. Yeah. And sometimes you can't see the business. You don't know the next customer, but if you build the right structure, then you go there. And so to me, that was really a pivotal point. And our journey was we did that. And then I took our leadership team. We went to the lake 3 days, all camped up in one house, going through Patrick Lencioni's got a book called The Advantage about healthy organizations trump smart. And we used that book as a method. And when we left there, we came out of with our mission, vision, values, what does Advoco, what does it need to look like? And that was probably one of the biggest things we did that sort of, I think, changed. And again, I wish I would have done it sooner, but that sounds like a huge shift. It was a huge shift. And that's when we just took off. So it sounds like something almost during that summit, it sounds like something internal just clicked for you. Like, can you even put into words what that was? I just think it's team. I think when we looked at the team, and it's kind of funny because part of it is, and they always talk about this, and it's funny, big Clemson guy, big Dabo fan, and there's a story when they won the national championship, he had a 3-legged stool that somebody gave him. And these fishing stools were used, they called it the BS chair, where whoever had the chair get to tell the story. And somebody brought it to him and he brought the players in and sat, whoever was in the chair would tell their life story. And things you didn't know about a person, like how they grew up. Maybe their father was in prison or mom left or divorced, whatever. And once you understand somebody's story, you now think of them differently and you understand and now you can do it. I think at Advoco, that just brought us together as a leadership team, that we started to understand each other. And, the book talks about opening your heart. One guy's like, oh man, I just don't want to open Pandora's box, We're a little worried. I said, no, don't go that far, but I think that was a moment when we really came together as a team with a common mission and vision. And then I think that's when the magic started.
Yeah, there are feelings and there are business feelings. And business feelings are their own really hairy pocket of feelings. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to separate personal life from business life.
Yeah.
It really is, because, we always looked at Advoco as a family. We had a motto, work hard, play hard. And I think the other thing is, and this maybe goes back to being a high I, and this is, again, these are little pet peeves I have. I always look at company events, right? And they'll have a company event and the CEO will show up or the president will show up, wave, shake two hands, and within 30 minutes to an hour, they're gone, right? Almost like we just graced you with our presence.
Yeah.
Like that bothers me. Like to me, if you went to an Advoco event, Steve, Paul, and I were always the last ones to leave. And it wasn't just play, it's we wanted to be there. We loved to be there. And so to me, that was another, I think, telling point is when you really love your company and you love your people, where else would I want to be? And so to me now, when you get into corporate events and people show up for like the proverbial hand wave, and so it drives me nuts.
How do you think about that separation between business and personal life? And I don't mean like work-life boundaries, getting off work at 6 and doing your whatever routine, like not like that exactly. Like how do you think about it just emotionally, like mentally?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is I think in that balance, right, we are family. Like we understand, who's getting married, who has kids. Like we want to know the family names. We want to know who the spouses are because they're part of the organization. I do think in the boundary thing, and I saw somebody speak on this, and it kind of hit me was Saturday mornings or weekends, if you're the leader, stop sending emails. Do not send an email. Because if it's Saturday morning and I send an email and I say, Caroline, don't worry about this, because I sent it, now you got to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you see that little notification.
Now, bing, you're like, crap, and you're no longer in the moment, and that's not fair. And so one of the things I stress to the leadership team is weekends, do not send emails. They're like, well, I just want to clean it up. No, don't.
Right.
If you want it, go offline, have them go out Monday morning. But to me, that I do think when you really talk work-life balance, it's not a badge of honor to answer emails Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday night, right? We all know that situation. We might be out to dinner with our spouse, significant other, whoever, and we're having a great conversation. Ding.
Ruined.
Look at it, and right there it's ruined because there's a problem. Something's going on. I can't do anything about it. But now it's my mind. So we got to put the phones away. So that was a big thing for us was there is that balance of work hard, play hard, be family, right? You're all in and so forth. But there are times we just have to let people do their thing.
And it can be selfish. I had to do a similar thing. And the point that I realized it was problematic was when I realized that I was really just doing it to get it off my plate.
Yeah.
It didn't really need to get done right then by any means.
Right.
And even though I would say like, don't worry about this now, it's like, okay, I can just schedule this to go out Monday and then it's off my plate, but it's not on someone else's plate until Monday.
You just pass the monkey to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And now they're like, and so I think there's these little things as leaders we have to think about. For every sort of action, there is a reaction, no matter whether we say it or not. They're doing it. So I think that was a big thing. One other thing, and I want to share this kind of with the audience, and this was another thing that I think separated Advoco is I've been in tech my whole life, and they always have these President's Club, right? So you take your top performers, you send them on lavish trips, wherever, and I just hated that. Like, why are we rewarding the people already been rewarded? Right? We basically say in the company, these 20% matter, 80% don't. And that's just, again, one of my pet peeves. And so we came up with an idea because we're like, all right, how do we grow the company? How do we keep people invested? And we came up with the ideas we were going to do a company President's Club. So we set the target 20% above last year's number and said, if we hit the target, everybody's going to the Caribbean. Everybody. It didn't matter who you are, didn't matter what. everybody goes.
And I assume the opposite. If you don't
If
hit
we
it,
don't
no
hit
one.
it, nobody goes.
Okay.
And because again, it's like a soccer team where you lose 4-2 and the striker says, well, I scored 2 goals.
Yeah, exactly.
We lost.
So what? Yeah.
So what? So people just got excited. We talked, and it was so funny because I remember, we blew through our number in August. Like people were so excited. I remember talking to one of the employees' spouses, and I said, man, I'm sorry, Josh has been on the road a lot. She goes, I don't care. We're going to the Caribbean.
Oh, that's great.
And so what those trips did was they were a way of bonding, a way of us bringing the families together. So we got to know them in a different world. And I tell you what, it was the cheapest money we ever spent. It was the best 4 days. They're legendary. And we started taking the next step further is we started in the Clemson co-op program. We started hiring Clemson co-ops. And we could get 2 or 3. We compete against Michelin, BMW, and so why would they want to come to work for little Advoco? When we went on our company trips, we took our co-ops.
Oh, cool.
Like who does that stuff,
Yeah.
right? Who does that? But guess what they do? When you're a college student and your company just takes you on a free 4-day trip, what do you do when you get back to school?
Talk to everyone about it.
You talk to everybody.
Yeah.
You're like, this is the best thing. And we became the #1 requested
That's brilliant.
co-op for the engineering department
That's great.
because they got to do meaningful work and we had fun and then we took them. And so I think sometimes as owners, we can get cheap. We don't think big. And so why take a company party? And they're like, well, what do we do with the co-ops? I'm like, they go.
Yeah. To your point, everything has a reaction, and this is just an example of
just
the
part
reaction
of it.
being a positive
Right.
one.
And again, I think that goes back probably to the earlier, when we talk about brand, when we talk about who we want to be as leaders, that was kind of all part of that mission of who we wanted to be. If you're going to be people-oriented, yes, we are people-oriented, but we're setting 10% here.
Exactly.
And y'all, you know what? Good job. You worked hard.
We are some people oriented.
Yeah. So I think those were really, I think, exciting things we did as an organization, and I think helped set us on the way to success.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So
Well, one last question to
Sure.
wrap us up here. So, in your experience, what is that founder factor? What is that it quality that makes for a successful entrepreneur?
I think it probably is the same thing as what's your favorite word. Like I think my favorite word, and I think is the difference between success and real success is intentionality. I think everything that we do, we have to be intentional. And I think sometimes we don't think through, all right, if I want to do this program or I want to hire this person, intentionally, what do we really want to do? And sometimes I think, we talked earlier, I said sometimes we get so enamored by the solution as opposed to the problem. We're trying, sales are down, we want to hire a salesperson. Well, we get so excited about the solution, hiring as opposed to maybe intentionally we look at the process. Why are we not successful? Do we have people, maybe we're not training them right? Maybe we don't have the right program. Maybe we can bring a coach in to help us, which we did at Advoco. We brought an outside coach in. And I probably should talk more about that. We don't have time, but bringing a coach in also helped us look and manage what was important. But to me, intentionality, the more intentional we are in everything and every discussion, I think that's the founder factor.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. And we'll have to bring you back on for another time to talk about the coaching piece.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Got so many good stories, so much fun stories. Business is such a fun sport.
It is a sport.
It
well
is a
said.
sport.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a sport.
And I'm glad to be part of it. I'm glad the people were with me and the teams, and who knows what's next.
Yeah. Well, can't wait to follow along the journey, see what's next for you. But thanks so much for coming on the show. It was
thanks
great.
for having me.
Yeah, great talking.
Hope I
with
didn't
you.
talk too much.
No, it's perfect. That's what we're here for. We want you to talk too much. It's great. You have a lot of insights to share. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Founder Factor. We look forward to seeing you next time. Feel free to follow along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your content.